Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Hey, warmer from the low! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got another exciting podcast today as it is the CAA Conference Preview Podcast. Let's get going and take a look at one of the best mid-major college basketball leagues in, I would say, all of college basketball. So we're going to have some great fun here. Dylan Brett, he does a tremendous job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. He does play-by-play work over at Hofstra. I believe that he does some contributions as well over at Mid-Major Madness and so much more. He's going to be joining me in segment number 2. We're going to be breaking down all 13 rosters here with the CAA. We're going to be taking a look at the coaching changes and so much more in the final segment. I'm going to get you guys my projector finish for the CAA, and to lead things off, we're going to be diving in and taking a look at what we've all got in terms of the trends and sort of what to expect with regards to home and road splits, what have you, in the CAA. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds in whatever way that they would like, whenever and wherever. EdgeBoost is making sure that 100% of gambling transactions are approved, and you get cashback rewards when you utilize EdgeBoost. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, GREG. That's going to get you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's dive in on this wonderful conference where we saw some pretty profitable teams out there. As over the last few years, UNC Wilmington has been one of your most profitable teams in all of college basketball. They were once again 21-12 against the spread. And if you date it back to the beginning of the 2021-22 season with UNC Wilmington, they're hitting at north of 59% against the spread. That would be 74-51-2 against the spread among teams that have actually been in college basketball for the entirety of this. Mercyhurst does not count because they've only played 1 year of college basketball. That's actually the 3rd best mark in all of college basketball. So that is something that has been pretty rock solid, and that is something that has been very much a concept with this entire league. And if you take a look at the success that the Coastal Conference had in non-conference games, it was quite stark. You only had 4 teams have a below 500 mark against the spread, and most of them were 5-6. William & Mary and Campbell were both 5-6 against the spread. Towson and Stony Brook 5-7 against the spread in non-conference play. And then you had a lot of success with Elon going 10-3 against the spread in non-conference play. Wilmington, Drexel 9-3 against the spread apiece. Hampton 7-3 against the spread. Charleston 8-4 against the spread. Delaware 7-4 against the spread. A&T, North Carolina A&T 7-5 against the spread. Hofstra 6-5 against the spread. Northeastern 7-6 against the spread. Monmouth a break even 6-1. So you have had a lot of teams be able to rise up, have quite a bit of success. And with regards to this league, it is very much a little bit of a melting pot of a lot of different styles. With the CAA, most of these teams have been traditionally quite a bit more on the slow end, and you saw that last season. Now, you don't have teams that are necessarily like 364th out of 364 teams in all of college basketball, though Stony Brook was not too far away. They were 351st in all of college basketball with this regard, but Drexel was 340th. You've got a team in Towson that year in and year out, they're outside the top 300 themselves. Hofstra was playing relatively slow last year. They were 328th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Elon slowed it down, 315th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. So you've got a lot of teams that they really like to do a nice job of being able to keep things low and slow, and this was a conference where rebounding really was supreme for a lot of these teams as well. Now, in the case of UNC Wilmington, the team that was able to make the NCAA tournament last season, they were very rock solid with this regard. They were number 20 in the country in terms of overall rebound rate, and there was a clear divide between the haves and the have-nots. Elon had 7'4" Matthew Von Coleman, so they were able to do a rock solid job on the glass as well. They were 26th in the country with regards to their rebound percentage. Towson, you know that they're always going to be there when it's all said and done. They were 57th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. Drexel was 63rd in the country with regards to rebound percentage as well. List goes on and on of teams that were able to be rock solid, and then the teams that weren't rock solid on glass, they were the teams that you were finding more towards the bottom of the conference, to say the least, as you did have a bunch in North Carolina A&T that was outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. That was reflected in the fact that they did not have themselves a very nice year. Monmouth was 302nd. They were a little bit more of a 500 team. They were able to make do with having Abdi Bashir be one of the best shooters just in the entirety of the conference, but I thought that that was something that was very stark, and that was something that you very much wanted to take note of when betting/fading these teams. And then with regards to three-point shooting as well, you don't necessarily have a lot of teams that super duper bomb it from three-point range in this conference. As a matter of fact, you had a few teams that were, for lack of a better term, a little bit rough with regards to their three-point shooting with regards to this conference as well. Campbell was 270th in the country, though, and it's probably going to be very, very much improved this year with regards to their overall three-point shooting percentage. It was a little bit of a hot and cold year for Elon as well. Elon was one of those teams that was very much built down low. They were about 202nd in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. A team like Stony Brook certainly had their ups and downs. They were about 176th in all of college basketball with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but a lot of teams were really able to elevate. Charleston, they were 83rd in the country, but at home, shot 41.4% from three-point range, less than 32% away from home, but certainly when they were at home, they were able to get the job done there. Towson was about 196th in the country with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. I mentioned UNC Wilmington and the fact that they were the team that represented in the NCAA tournament. They were a team that was solid with their three-point shooting. I'm not going to call it necessarily amazing, but they were about 226th in the country, 32.8%. A lot of relatively even-steven teams with regards to their overall three-point shooting percentage, and that caused for, shall we say, a lot of intrigue with regards to these totals as well, because as I mentioned, you had a lot of teams that played at a relatively slow tempo. That is other than William and Mary. You didn't just get William, you didn't just get Mary, you got both. They were a top 100 team with regards to total possessions per game, but 15 overs and 15 unders, so it wasn't necessarily stark there. Campbell's always been a relatively slow team, but now John Andrewchuk coming into the fold, that might be changing a little bit. He was an assistant over at Florida, 11, 18, and 1 to the over with 11 overs, 18 unders, and a push. Delaware, who is no longer in the conference, by the way, 23 overs and 11 unders. They were very much the, shall we say, black sheep of the crew, as they played relatively fast. They popped it and locked it a lot from three-point range. Losing them means that it's going to be an even slower conference, as you had a lot of teams that were hovering right around 500 with regards to their over and under rate. North Carolina A&T, 16 overs and 15 unders. Charleston, William and Mary, Towson, all either 15 and 15 or 16 and 16 with regards to the over and the under rate. Northeastern and Hampton, they were both able to hit north of 55% of their games to the over. And if you take a look at what happened in terms of non-conference play versus conference play, I think that that was very telling, as in conference play you only had 3 teams play more overs and unders. Hampton, 11 overs, 8 unders, and a push. Delaware, 15 overs and 8 unders, no longer there. Towson, 13 overs and 7 unders. Meanwhile, you had a lot of teams going under. William and Mary, 6 overs, 13 unders. Campbell, 6 overs, 12 unders, and a push. Drexel, 7 overs, 13 unders. North Carolina A&T, 7 overs, 12 unders. Hofstra, 8 overs, 12 unders. Elon, 8 overs, 11 unders. 11 unders and 9 overs for Monmouth as well. So that was very much rampant with this conference, and with this conference as well. I do think that it's very interesting to be taking a look at some of these home and road splits as well, because for the CAA, they do have to take a lot of bye games. They were very successful against the spread in that regard in terms of non-conference play as well, and that's reflected in the fact that these teams all did a relatively solid job on the road. You only had 4 teams be below 52.9% with regards to their cover rate on the road. Drexel was the main one, 9-5 against the spread, and then UNC Wilmington was 8-5 against the spread. Stony Brook, 9-6-1 against the spread. A&T, Campbell, 10-7 against the spread. Charleston, 7-5 against the spread. Towson, 8-6 against the spread. And And then your 4 teams that were less than successful, Delaware, we no longer have to deal with, 6-8 against the spread. William & Mary was rough away from home, 4-10 against the spread. Very much a team that relies upon a lot of three-point shooting, hitting the road. That can explain that. Hofstra 6-7-1 against the spread. And then you had Northeastern at 7-8 against the spread. And we do not need to worry about Delaware anymore with regards to this conference. Just throw that in there as well. Main reason why is because they are now out there in Conference USA. So they'll be in Miley Cyrus's favorite conference because it is a party out there in Conference USA. But we do have ourselves a lot of fun to be taking a look at with this conference, and we're going to be chatting about it with Dylan Brett, who does such great work with the play-by-play work of Hofstra next right here on Cusco Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Great to have this man aboard once again for our Coastal Conference previews. We've got Dylan Brett aboard. He provided really good insights on the conference last year. I know that he does some incredible work gauging this great conference as he's over there at Hofstra. He's the radio play-by-play voice for them. I know that he's doing a little bit of everything with regards to being able to follow this great game of college basketball. And additionally, I know that he's doing a little bit of work with the New York Boulders as well for those that are baseball fans. And you're able to follow Dylan on Twitter/X at his first name, Dylan, and then BRXETT. And Dylan, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, thank you so much for the fantastic introduction. And it's getting to be about that time where we could talk some college hoops again. So I'm excited.
Yep, we finally know what we're going to be getting a little bit more out of this season after quite literally 2,500 players entered in the transfer portal. So there was a lot of movement. There was a lot of mixing and shaking. And there certainly was that out in the Coastal Conference. And I want to lead off with this team in UNC Wilmington because I know that this has been called this by a few people over at Mid-Major Madness, and I think that's so true. It's almost like the Avengers of the Coastal Conference. You've got guys like a Madison Durer, who was in the conference last year, heading on over there. CJ Luster, who was over at Stony Brook, he heads on over. North Carolina A&T's Jonathan Lamonthe. Like, the list goes on, and I think that this is just a very intriguing sort of collection of talent.
Yeah, they're going to be a must-watch team because they're doing something that's pretty much unprecedented. You know, whenever I talk to Speedy Claxton during the offseason, I always kind of chat with him about, so there's 2,500 guys in the portal. How do you identify talent from, you watch tape on every single one of these guys? And what Takeo Siddle does at UNCW this offseason is he says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go with guys we know, we've seen, and have proven they can be a difference maker in this conference. They have a bunch of guys like Madison Durr from Monmouth, CJ Luster from Stony Brook, who are a bit more ball dominant. They thrive off the dribble with the ball in their hands. So I don't know how necessarily the spacing factor is going to work, but they've got a fantastic staff over there. And I love the addition of Christian May as well, the great two-way option. He's going to be one of their top defenders. And they also keep Noah Ross and Nolan Hodge, their premier wing duo, which in the tournament last year was just huge. Offense, defense, loose balls, you name it. Those two guys were unsung heroes of that championship run.
Oh, absolutely. I love those guys coming back, and I think that is going to be a great collection of talent. And how about if we talk about the team that you cover the main, as that would be Hofstra. And with Hofstra, it's a really interesting roster because, as we know, typically with Hofstra, they leave a little bit of something to be desired down low, but bringing back Silas Sunday for another year, I think is going to be rock solid. And they bring in James Patterson as well, which I like. But the big thing is Cruz Davis is back from season ago to be able to headline that backcourt. You mentioned it. They're coached by Speedy Claxton, a man that played in the NBA, so he knows a little bit about the guard position, and how Joshua Reeves and AJ Willis is able to blend with this offense, I think is going to be the X factor for them.
Yeah, I've watched them in practice a little bit so far this summer. You talked about James Patterson. I watched him play both at Stack and at Iona briefly under Tobin Anderson, and he was recruited by Seton Hall as well. And whenever you get recruited by Tobin Anderson and Shaheen Holloway, obviously you've got a certain type of moxie to your game. You've got a very physical archetype. You crash the glass. You can jump out of the building. You play phenomenal defense, and that's something that I think is going to be much needed on this Hofstra team this year because you touched on it. They're a bit lacking up front in the size department. Silas Sunday is really their only major threat at the 5. Josh Decady is going to get big minutes at the 4, but they're going to need all hands on deck defensively and on the glass. And I think Patterson plays a very, very big role in that. And one guy that you didn't mention who I think is flying under a lot of guys' radars because he's a freshman, do not be surprised if Preston Edmeade at the guard position gets very big run as a freshman. He's running with the starters in practice. He's a great scoring threat, really knows how to make things happen with the ball in his hands. He can dribble in and out of the teeth of a defense. He's got great feel for the game for an 18-year-old. I'm watching him all year long.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fun Hofstra team to watch, and Hofstra was actually really good with their two-point shooting defense last year as well, so we'll see if that's a constant as Dylan Brett, who does great work with the play-by-play work over at Hofstra, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups, and I think that this team is intriguing because the last few years, Monmouth has just had that one dude that has gone out there and averaged darn near 20 points per game. I mean, a few years ago, it was Xander Rice, the coach's son. Last year, it was Abdi Bashir, who just absolutely took it over, and it looks like it's probably going to be Jack Collins this year, but it does feel like a little bit more of a well-rounded team with Doc Mortar back. You've got Jason Rivera-Torres, who's able to give you a bit of something. I really like Cornelius Robinson Jr., and I think that this is going to be a fun team to watch.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head with Monmouth, where they're going to be a lot more well-rounded this year, in my opinion. They lose their 2 best players probably in Madison Durr and Abdi Bashir, but they retain nearly their entire supporting cast. Jack Collins is going to be the starting point guard from day one. Doc Mortar up front, the big 7-footer who caused chaos in the CAA tournament on the offensive glass. And then a guy that nobody really talks about as well, Andrew Ball, is going to be a difference maker at 6'8". And you talked about Cornelius Robinson, a good spot-up shooter, a good two-way player. Obviously, there's going to be something to be desired at first in the scoring department, I feel like, but a team like Monmouth that brings back so many rotational pieces, so many good players off the bench, I feel like is only going to get better as the season goes on with guys settling into their new roles.
Absolutely. And then I take a look at this team, and this is not a team that's really rocking the boat too much. You've got a few additions with Towson. Jack Dumbia is going to be coming in. Morsek, a true 7-footer from Hawaii and Fresno State, but it's the same suspects that we saw really scoring for them last year. Dylan Williamson, Tyler Tejada, they're going to be back. A really nice 1-2 punch. I do expect a little bit more of Abdu Sam as well down low, as with Towson. One of their hallmarks is being really good on glass. They've got a ton of size. They've got that dominant scorer in Dylan Williamson. And I mean, going up against Pat Scary, well, it is really scary.
Yeah, I have Towson going into the season as the slim favorites over the likes of UNCW and Charleston right now. Obviously, that could change between now and November. But in this landscape, continuity is just something that nobody can seem to buy. And when you bring back all league selections, Tejada, Williamson, you have the 2 best scorers arguably in the league right there. And they're going to be instant favorites for Conference Player of the Year. They might even take away from each other in that regard. The good thing about Towson is no matter who else comes in and out in the depth piece or in the depth spots, the defense carries over with Pat Scary every single year. You know they're going to play some tenacious defense. You know they're going to rebound at a high level. It's something that he instills in every single player that comes through his program, whether it be through the portal or they come through high school. Abdu Sam, like you said, I think is going to be a key pivotal piece up front. But ultimately, the Towson identity is going to stay with this new group of supporting pieces. And now they have the dynamic scoring ability back for another year of Tejada and Williamson. I don't see how many teams are going to find a way to beat this team very easily.
Well, how about if we talk about a team that's going to be looking to do the exact opposite? William and Mary, that Coach Earl system of just launching 3 after 3. It was very exciting last year, to say the least. And they bring back Kyle Pulliam along with Chase Lowe from last year. They're going to have some new pieces. Kate Haskins, he comes on over from the Ivy League, so we know that he's a smart guy. Joel Emmanuel from Fairleigh Dickinson is rock solid as well. Obviously, this is going to be a team that's going to leave something to be desired on the glass, but this is a team that very much looks for a whole bunch of guys that stand 6'4" to 6'6", and they're all going to be looking to bomb it from 3-point 3-point range.
They're a fun bunch to watch. They kind of shocked the world in the CAA last year a little bit. I called their first conference game of the Brian Earl era. They were playing Hofstra at the Mac Arena. They went up, I believe it was 17-5 in the first 4 minutes. And you see a huddle full of guys on Hofstra like, what just happened to us? Nobody in this conference has seen this style of play before last year. They run the ball up and down the floor. They can crash the defensive glass at a pretty high level. And they've got great shooters all over the floor. Chase Lowe is going to be a great facilitator. He's going to distribute the ball to as many guys as he needs. The Dorseys are going to be dearly missed, but a guy like Kyle Frazier on the outside, the D2 transfer, is a prolific shooter. And if he can hit his spots and get open as much as he did last year, I don't see any reason why William and Mary is not going to cruise back into the top 5 of the standings.
Yep, with William and Mary, it was just an unprecedented style, something we haven't really seen in the Coastal Conference, as typically you get more slow and controlled teams, so that was a lot of fun to watch, and this is going to be an interesting team as well, because North Carolina A&T, let's call it what it is, it was not necessarily the greatest year for them last year, but I thought that it was really interesting in that they suspended a lot of their top scorers for the final, I would like to say, like 10 or so games of the season, like Ryan Forrest, Landon Glasper, Rod the Fold, and that's actually when they played their best basketball. Now, Jonathan Lamothi, he's over at UNC Wilmington. That is going to be hurting them quite a bit, but a guy like Bryson Ogletree was able to step up, give them a little bit of something. I'm going to say this name incorrectly, but Evstorius Kalazitis. Hopefully, we got somewhat close there. He was able to give them a bit of something down low as well, and I think that's going to be interesting to see if that positive momentum towards back half of the year last year translates to this year.
Yeah, and I think their administration's kind of counting on that as well. I think this is going to be the make or break year of the Monte Ross era. They do bring back a guy in Jalil Mackay that I really like that could score the ball. He plays very solid defense. And ultimately, that's really the area of their team that took the biggest jump when they made all those suspensions. They made a commitment to defense in the back half of the year. It was something their staff talked about time and time again in press conferences, to the media. They were committing to defense. Obviously, they didn't have their most talented scorers on the floor. And if they can establish that as a clear identity going into this year and run it from November through March, I think they should at least take a step up success-wise.
I agree with you, as Dylan Bright, who does great play-by-play work over at Hofstra, is joining me on the CAA Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think that this team is so intriguing because Campbell, they have a coaching change in the offseason. They hire off of the Florida coaching tree, and, well, that was a coaching tree that we saw a few hires off of, and I think that this is going to work out well for them with Andrew Check coming on in, and for Campbell, lots of talented players are going to be entering into the process. Quinn Mincy, a really nice scorer over at UMass Lowell. I do like the fact that they bring in Amiri Stewart as well, Cam Gregory. I take a look at this bunch, and they're going to be a little bit undersized. When they go up against Towson, they're probably going to lose a battle on glass, but lots of versatility, lots of guys that are able to light it up, and I do think that this is going to be a fun team to watch.
Yeah, everybody's been raving about the hire of John Anderchek, and I think all those cornerstones that you touched on when talking about Florida and that Florida style are going to be the key to Campbell's success this year. They're going to shoot a lot of threes, they're going to crash the glass, and they're going to limit the turnovers. And I want to go back to last year just briefly because Campbell was a team that myself and a lot of people had near the bottom half of the conference, and then all of a sudden the Colby Duggins of the world explode onto the scene, and they find themselves right in the mix heading into the CAA tournament, knocking off teams like Hofstra, playing teams like Towson, very tough. So I'm definitely not making the mistake of writing off Campbell this year, especially with a talented young coach. He was named to the 40 under 40 list at the helm.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that this team is very intriguing as well. And it's Northeastern because with Northeastern, it just feels like it's been a little bit inconsistent with them over the last few years. Obviously, Bill Cohen has had a very, very great history over at Northeastern, has taken the team to a lot of NCAA tournaments. And now it's going to be up to LA Pride, in my opinion, to really step up for this team. I felt like Masai Troutman and his injury last year was very costly, but I do take a look at this Northeastern team, and I do think that if they can get back to really what has been their identity under Cohen for so many years, being able to crash the glass, being able to be good with regards to rebounding, and having nice versatility, that this could be a team that surprises.
Yeah, for years and years, Northeastern was a team under Bill Cohen that really staked itself on senior leadership, graduate guys leading the charge, and as we have both come to see, the transfer portal era of college basketball just completely blows up that notion. I mean, if you've got a fifth-year senior on your roster, there's like a 90% chance he got him from another school halfway through his career. But that's going to be the challenge for Northeastern going into this year. You mentioned L.A. Pratt. J.B. Frankel, the New York City kid, is another guy I really liked. The 3-point output left a lot to be desired for Northeastern last year. They were much better inside the arc than they were outside, and their defense was solid enough to win them as many games as they could. But ultimately, in this era of college basketball, the way the style of play is kind of trending in the conference, they're going to need guys like Frankel and Pratt to step up from beyond the arc, hit their threes at a high enough clip, and keep them in those shootout style games that feel like they're becoming more and more common.
And I'll throw this in here as well. A couple fewer turnovers will probably do them some good as well. And then this team I find to be very intriguing as well because Drexel has been one of the best teams on the glass in college basketball over the last few years. They're going to be losing a lot of that leadership from a season ago. I think that Cole Hargrave was really a heart and soul piece of that team from a season ago. But bringing back someone like Shane Blakeney, who's got good versatility, is able to do a little bit of everything for the team, I think is going to be very massive for them. Additionally, they're going to be having back a guy, Victor Panoff, who at 6'7" I really like. And I'm going to probably say this name incorrectly, but you've got the 7'1" gentleman, the international man of mystery, Martin de la Portere, hopefully I said that correctly, coming in to be able to give this team some size as well. Looks very clear that once again this team is going to be looking to crash a glass with how many big men that they have. I think the question is being able to replace the likes of McGee and company from the backcourt.
Yeah, Kobe McGee and Jason Drake were very solid. They're both out the door this year. Those guys were kind of the engines that spurred that Drexel backcourt on. The front court is going to be so fun to watch this year, and it's kind of going to be interesting to see who gets a majority of the minutes as well. You have the Victor Panovs, the Garfield Turners of the world, and I think when you look at guys like Ralph Akuta as well, who is a youngster they brought on as a freshman last year, didn't play, but he stands up at 7'1". That part of the team is going to be sealed. I think everybody knows Drexel's going to rebound the ball at a high level. They love to block shots, and ultimately that's kickstarted their offense. But guys like Kavan Vanderhorst and Shane Blakeney, who were both back for their junior seasons at 6'2" and 6'5", respectively, are going to have an uptick in the scoring department a little bit if Drexel wants to see success this year. Last year was a down year. They got dealt a horrific hand by the transfer portal with Amari Williams and their entire core leaving for greener pastures. So now it's year 2. Last year was kind of a rebuilding year, and I think they should have some very positive momentum with all those pieces up front that saw experience last year.
I agree with you. And this was a brutal year for the team last year, but I feel like there's upward momentum for this team, and that'd be Stony Brook. Now, they are going to be losing CJ Lusser, who was such a good scorer for them last season, and Joe Octave when he was actually out there on the court because he missed a lot of games due to injury. I mean, he was just an engine that helped make this team run. But that said, picking up someone like a Rob Brown, I thought was absolutely massive. Brown was a nice double-figure scorer over at Nichols. I think that he is going to be a standout for them. Eric Pratt is a guy that I really like. I'm someone from the great state of Wisconsin, so I know all too well about his game, and I feel like Stony Brook did a great job of being able to utilize the transfer portal, bringing in some nice players, and Toby Okanu is a guy that he had a lot of success as a freshman, has dealt with some injuries over the last few years. If he can get back to where he was a few years ago, I think that could be big for Stony Brook.
Yeah, Toby's going into his senior year. He's a great two-way player that they've really prided him upon going back to his freshman year, but the last 3 years he's dealt with a myriad of different injuries, leg, ankle, you name it. So he's going into his senior year now out of Joliet, Illinois, and I think he's going to be one of the engines that drives Stony Brook along. But everyone forgets about Colin O'Connor, a guy who kind of faded away towards the back end of last year, but he was in the mix for the CAA Rookie of the Week honors. It felt like every single week. He was one of the most dynamic scoring freshmen in the conference. Did leave a little bit to be desired in the efficiency department. He took a lot of shots and had a lot of turnovers, but the shot-making ability, his ability to knock down tough shots was absolutely there. And ultimately, that's an attribute that you can't teach. And up front for Stony Brook, it's going to be time for the guys like Leon Nahar and Quinn Gorman, who have been sitting on the bench these past couple of years, to step up because they got absolutely killed in a lot of their losses on the glass.
Yep, they certainly did. And this Hampton team, they were a team that really stepped it up on the glass last season. Now they have the opposite problem. I don't think that they've got a ton of three-point shooting this year, but they do bring in a guy, Michael Eliu. He just really didn't get out there too much for Tulane last year, but 2 years ago was a rock-solid scorer over at Siena. Xavier Long is a guy that I think could be, once again, a big X factor for him, much like he was a season ago. And then bringing in a guy like a Christian Watson, who began his career over at Miami. Having Jakail Gaines-Wyatt. He comes on over from the SWAC, where he was a double-figure scorer over at Alcorn State. I think it's a really intriguing bunch, and one that has quite a bit of size and one that was really good on glass last season.
Yeah, Hampton's going to stake their identity on defense again this year, and in Ivan Thomas's first year, it was very clear what their identity, what their MO was going to be. They were going to defend at a high level. They weren't going to shoot. They weren't going to let you get second chances. In fact, they had the best defensive rebounding rate in the conference last year. And this is my favorite stat when it comes to Hampton because it shows where their program was versus where it is now. They jumped 116 spots in KenPom last season, up to 215. That's the highest jump in the conference. It finally feels like this program has a direction because they have a clear identity. They have something they're always going to default to when they're not shooting the ball well because they did not have many good shooting games last year. They were bottom 50 in the conference in effective field goal. But one thing that Hampton's always going to do with their big guards, and by the way, the guys like Noah Farrakhan, George Beal, those guys box out better than any guards I've seen in the conference last year. It was so fun to watch team rebounding from Hampton. So I think defense and team rebounding are going to be what they hang their hats on again this year, which is why I'm counting on them for a very solid year again.
Yep, I think that they're going to be rock solid on the defensive side of things. Again, a little bit suspect with regards to three-point shooting, but when you don't take a lot of threes, you don't need to make a lot of threes, as they're very much going to be living down low. And then I think that this is a team that's going to be really interesting because they lived down low last year as well. That would be Elon. Elon all of a sudden was able to become one of the better defensive teams that we saw in mid-major college basketball. Helps when you've got a man who stands 7'4" that's blocking a whole bunch of shots in Matthew Van Komen. Obviously, they do have to replace him, and they do have to replace Simpkins squared, as I always like to call them, but picking up Kasper Klonzich very late in the process, guy that began his career over at St. Joe's along with Albany. That's going to be solid. Chandler Cuthrell, he was over at Fort Wayne last season. He's a guy that I really like as well, and I think that's going to be interesting to see if Elon is able to continue that upward momentum that they had down low last year.
Elon's always a unique team because under Billy Taylor, they play more zone than anybody in the conference. They sit back in that 2-3. In fact, I think last year, the last I checked, they were top 3 in the country in zone possessions played on defense on Synergy. So it's no secret what they're going to do defensively. They're going to pack the paint. They're going to make you shoot over them and hit a lot of threes. I also like the addition of a guy like Bryson Spell, the grad transfer from Liberty. He's 6'9", 230. They're going to need a lot more beef on the inside with all the talent that they lost to the portal. You mentioned Simpkins Square. They were absolutely dynamic to watch. Matthew Van Komen at 7'4", who's out the door. It's going to be more of a collective effort down low for Elon, but I think they finally found a rhythm with a defense that had notoriously, in Billy Taylor's first couple years in the conference, just gotten absolutely torched by the hot shooting teams like Hofstra, UNCW, Charleston, but they finally found their identity. They finally settled into a little bit of a groove. Caleb Middleton's another solid sophomore out of New Hampshire at 6'11". They're going to have about 5 guys that they rotate down at the low block, and I think all of them should give them pretty solid minutes in conference play.
I do agree with you, and I do think that with Elon, once again, going to be hanging their hat on defense, going to be hanging their hat on rebounding. Unfortunately, you don't have someone that's 7'4". That's very hard to ask for out there in the Coastal Conference, but certainly they did a nice job of revamping that in the offseason as well. And if I'm not mistaken, we've got one last team bid, and that'd be Charleston. Charleston, rock solid year last year under Chris Mack. Some interesting home and road splits with regards to their three-point shooting, but they're going to be looking to bomb it once again. Kobe Duggan, who had an amazing second half of the season last year for Campbell, is coming in. Connor Rickman, who he just wasn't utilized at Cincinnati, but 2 years ago at Bradley, he was a really good mid-major guard. He comes in, one of my favorite names in all of college basketball, Mr. Dean, first name Mr., last name Dean. He comes in as well, and I look at this Charleston team, and I think that they're going to be a lightning rod with their three-point shooting, but also bringing in likes of Christian Reeves and company should help them out down low.
Yeah, one thing about Charleston, and we're a couple years deep in this NIL scenario now, so we could comfortably say this. They've got deeper pockets than anybody in the conference. They've attracted the most expensive transfers compared to anybody in the conference. Colby Duggan was a very tough get. Mr. Dean probably should be playing high major basketball right now after the year he had at USC Upstate, but he's here at Charleston, and he is absolutely electric with the basketball in his hands. Off the dribble, you see him with the step back time and time again. He can slash through defenses at 6'6". He's got long arms. If I had to put my money on anybody, he will be playing high major basketball next season. He's only a sophomore out of Miami, so he's still got plenty of time. And Colby Duggan was a guy at Campbell last year who his shot-making ability was unlike anybody in the conference. Fadeaways off one leg, behind the backboard sometimes. He didn't meet a shot he didn't like, but he also didn't meet a shot he couldn't make, is what I said about him on one of the broadcasts. And these are all guys that could step outside and hit the three, but Charleston They might be a little bit lacking on the defensive end of the court this year. They lost a lot of the cornerstones of last year's team, the Daywolf Tavares, the Darren Boyds of the world, and then their first time in forever without having Ante Berzovic anchoring their entire team. They're going to be able to score. They're going to put 100 on the board any night they want on day one, but they're going to need to come together on the defensive end as a team, and that's an area where I think fellow contenders Towson and UNC Wilmington have them beat to challenge for the title.
This is going to be an incredible conference. Dylan, we just broke down all 13 teams that we've got out there in the CAA. I know you're going to do an amazing job of being able to gauge this entire conference, doing all the play-by-play work over at Hofstra and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. So obviously my big production every single year, I've done it for 2 years. This will be the third now, is the CAA preview, where I write basically an entire essay on every single team in the conference, their outlook. Last year, I think it totaled 80 some odd pages and over 30,000 words, I believe. So you mentioned my Twitter earlier in the broadcast, Dylan Brett, but the E is replaced with an X. If you want to get this year's CAA preview, which should be out mid-October, I cannot wait to share it with everybody. I'm already hard at work on it. And Greg, thank you very much for having me on. It's an absolute blast as always, my friend.
Absolutely. Dylan is one of the best in the business when it comes to taking a look at this great conference. Every single time he joins me, lends amazing insights. So a big thanks to Dylan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the CAA.
Hey, I'm Dr. Z, and I'm a neurosurgeon. So that means long hours, early rounds, late nights, and everything in between. And through it all, I wear figs. Because they're built for what I do. Through the chaos, through the hours, and through whatever the day throws at me, they do their job so I can do mine. They're comfortable when it counts and functional when I need them the most. So where do you wear your figs? On shift, on call, on the couch in the break room, listening to this podcast? Wherever it is, they fit right in. And now listeners of this podcast can get 15% off their first order. Just head to wearfigs.com and use code FIGSRX at checkout. That's wearfigs.com, code FIGSRX.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It was great to be joined by Dylan Brett. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. His insight on the CAA, the Coastal Conference, truly is second to none. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Dylan for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector finish for the CAA. Now, because I am doing a conference preview podcast today, if we miss any news and notes in college basketball on Tuesday, which we're really running low on college basketball news and notes as of right now, those are going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow, so have no fear there. But how about if we do dive in with regards to this projector finish? And dead last, it is North Carolina A&T. For North Carolina A&T, a really nice charge towards the back half of the season last year, but where's the production going to be coming from? Bryson Ogletree was banged up last year, limited 18 games. He averaged about 7.5 points per contest. You get in Trent Middleton from Delaware. He was able to log about 5.5 points per game. And Uchenna Kelman-Nichols, he was with the team 2 seasons ago. Last year, he was missing due to injury. He should be able to give you a bit of something, but you're relying upon Amadou Doumbia, who comes on over from UMass. At 6'11", he was reserved for them to be able to give you a bit of production. You were able to get a little bit out of Jalil McKee towards back half of the season last year. He was part-time starter when you had all the suspensions, but I just don't see where the production is coming from. This was a team that was very rough on defense. They didn't have a lot going on offense. That's the last of my projector finish. That is going to be North Carolina A&T. At number 12, I'm going to be going with Stony Brook. Stony Brook does have a little bit of potential and some upside because they do bring in a guy that I like in Rob Brown. He was over at Nichols last year, 13 points, 3.5 boards per contest, career 39% three-point shooter. And Eric Pryor was over at UW Milwaukee where he was averaging about 10.5 points per game. The big thing for this team is that I don't know where the depth is going to be coming from. Tony Onakowo, hopefully I said that correctly, he was very good as a freshman when he was averaging about 7.5 points, 3 assists per contest. Just a bunch of injuries over the last few seasons. Richard Fields, who's 6'9", he comes in from Hampton, but this was a team that was 347th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 354th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, got completely gashed there, and even though you bring in the 7-footer and Olga Koljanets, hopefully I said that correct, he was able to pop it from 3, not really a guy that's going to give you a whole heck of a lot of rebounding. So, number 12 in my projector finish, we we are going to be going with Stony Brook. Number 11, we are going to be going with Elon. Elon was really good down low last year. Matthew Von Coleman, 7'4" big man, though, is now out of the fold. So now they're going to be looking to Chandler Cuthrell, who was over at Fort Wayne last year, 7.5 points, 5.8 rebounds per game, but in the final 21 games, 8.5 points, 6.7 rebounds per contest. Randall Pettis, the second, he's going to be coming in from Northern Kentucky. He was able to average about 7 points per contest. Caleb Middleton, who was over at New Hampshire, gave that team a little bit of something, but I mean, this was a team that was 356th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They lose a lot of size from last season. They really don't have a ton in the backcourt. I think that that's going to be difficult for them after they were 26th in the country in rebound percentage and 14th in road 2-point shooting percentage last year. I think that that's going to be taking a little bit of a drop off. You do have Isaac Carroll back as well, 39.5% 3-point shooter, but just very bare bones out there in the backcourt. So number 11 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with Elon. Number 10, I'm going to be going with Northeastern. They had won 12 games or fewer each of the past 4 seasons prior to last year. They were able to go 17-15 last year, but they do lose 3 out of their top 4 scorers. L.A. Pratt is your main guy coming back. 2.5 assists, a steal and a half, 11.2 points per contest. William Kamiri, he was able to throw in there about 8 points per contest. Shot 38.5% from 3. And J.B. Frankel also shot 38.8% from 3-point range. You're going to have a little bit of difficulty with regards to, shall we say, size. Yuri Fritz is back after he gave the team about 3.5 rebounds per game. And Harris Elzovich, hopefully I said that correct, he was on West Virginia's bench last season. He should be able to give you a little bit there. This team last year was 26th in the country in terms of block shot percentage, and they do lose quite a few of those good shot blockers from a season ago, so that is going to be a bit of an issue for them. And I do think that just the game has passed by Bill Cohen, for lack of a better term. I hate to say it, but I do feel that way. Number 10 in my projector finish, going to be going with Northeastern. At number 9, I'm going with Drexel. The Dragons of Drexel are a team that does a really good job on glass. 26th in the country in road defensive rebound percentage last year, 37th in block shot rate as well. Now, you do lose quite a few guys from a season ago, including Cole Hargrave, who was the heart and soul of what you had down low, but Victor Panoff, 6.5 points, 4 boards per contest is rock solid. Shane Blakeney is able to space the floor at 6'6". He was their 6th man. He was able to throw in there about 4 boards, 7.5 points per game, shot 34% from 3-point range. They don't have a ton of guys coming in. Dylan Tingler, he comes in after he was glued to the bench over at Eastern Michigan last season. You've got Valium Garcia Artisan, who gave you 6.5 points per game off the bench. Some really good size. Just a few international men of mystery. They've got a few 7-footers on the roster that really don't have a lot of Division I experience, which I think is going to be able to help them stay rock solid on glass. I just don't know where the backcourt production is going to be coming from with Kobe McGee and company out of the fold. So as a result, I set Drexel at number 9 in my projector finish. Number 8 in my projector finish, we are going to be going with Hampton. For Hampton, I just don't know where the 3-point shooting is really going to be coming from for this team. They do bring back Xavier Long. I like what Long is able to bring to the table. 6.5 points, 6 boards. He did shoot 37% from 3 at 6'7". That's going to be able to help them out. You bring in Michael Ealy, who he was over at Siena 2 seasons ago, averaging 13 points per contest. Last year, he's just glued to the bench over at Tulane, and he has dealt with a few injury concerns. Christian Watson never has really been a great 3-point shooter, but he has some versatility. He began his career at Miami at Southern Miss last year, about 8 points, 4 boards per contest, so he'll be able to give you a bit of something. And then Cody Williams, I do think is a little bit of an X factor. He was at Hawaii last year, was a 37.5% 3-point shooter at 6'5". Daniel Johnson, he should be able to give you a bit of something as well. And then Jacal Gaines-Wyatt, who was over at Elkhorn State last season, he was able to average about 11.5 points per contest. And then Josh Ogadele, hopefully I said that correct, he was at 6'10", 6'11" at Tennessee State, a part-time starter that was able to give you about 4 boards per contest after this team was 57th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They should be able to do a relatively solid job with regards to their defense and on the glass once again. So we're going with Hampton with number 8 in terms of my projector finish. At number 7, we are going to be going with Monmouth. Monmouth is going to be returning 5 other top 8 scorers from the season ago. Now, Abdi Bashir, who was their top man, he was averaging darn near 20 points per contest last year. He's out of the fold, but you bring back Jack Collins, who was a matrix in which he filled up every department of the stat sheet. 9.3 points, 5.8 boards, 3 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. So I really love what he's able to bring to the table. And Cornelius Robinson was rock solid down low. About 8 points, 5.7 rebounds per game. Kavion McClain, he's going to add some punch to the backcourt after at Texas Southern last year. 14 points, 4.5 assists, 1.8 steals per contest on 38% 3-point shooting. And then I am very intrigued to see what Jason Rivera-Torres is able to bring to the table. He was with the Dons of San Francisco last year, and he did, frankly, nothing. But 2 years ago at Vanderbilt at 6'7", 6.5 6.5 points, 3 boards per contest. You've got Justin Ray, who's able to give you a bit of three-point shooting off the bench, but Doc Mortar is also going to be a nice mixer and shaker. He was able to give the team a block and a half per contest. He was rock solid there. Now, this was a team that is going to look to elevate their two-point shooting percentage, 356th in all of college basketball, so Mortar going to need to give them a little bit more on the offensive side of things, but do think that they're going to be improved there and a little bit more balance. After the last few seasons, they've really been relying upon a one-man band to be able to get the offense going, so going with Monmouth in terms of my projector or finish at number 7. At number 6, I'm going with William & Mary. The team took 51.5% of their shots from three-point range last year, the third highest shot rate in all of college basketball, and they do bring back two of their top 4 scorers, and it's the third highest shot rate from three-point range in college basketball. Chase Lowe, he was shooting 40% from 3, 8.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, steal per contest. Kyle Pulliam, 9 points per contest in 23 games last season, but Joel Emanuel, he's going to be able to elevate this team. He was over at Fairleigh Dickinson last year, and he was fairly solid. 2 assists, 5 boards, 11 points, 36% three-point shooting. Kate Askins, 36.5% three-point shooter. He was able to give the team about 9.5 points per contest. Tunde Valberg-Fasasi, hopefully I said that correctly, coming in from LaSalle as well. 35% three-point shooter with his size, about 6 points per contest. And then you get Kyle Frazier back after he was able to give you about 5 points per contest off the bench. They are going to need to look to improve a defense that was 303rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that is going to be a bit of an issue for them. Not a team that necessarily does the world's greatest job on the offensive glass either, but this is a team that bombs it from 3. They play a unique style out there in the CAA. So at number 6 in terms of my projector finish, going to be going with the tag team of both William and Mary. At number 5, I'm going to be going with Campbell. With Campbell, I really like the hire that they made in the offseason. John Andrewchuk, I do think is going to do a really good job of being able to elevate this team. I thought that was a great hire after he was able to do such a good job with that Florida coaching staff last season. And the Fighting Camels last year were 37th in three-point shooting defense last year. They bring back one of their top defensive anchors in Cam Gregory to go along with their great transfers, with Gregory about 2 assists, 8 points per contest last season. Quentin Mincy is your main guy coming in. 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, 17 points, 6.5 boards, 39.5% three-point shooter. Amiri Stewart had 12.5 points, about 3 assists, 1.7 steals per contest last season, and this was a team that they were able to do a really good job of just having versatility come into their program. With Amiri Stewart, he was over at Sacred Heart last year. Anak Columbi, he was over at Western Kentucky, 4 boards, 8.5 points per contest. And then Jeremiah Johnson came on towards the back half of the season over at UW Green Bay last season. He should be able to give this team a bit of something. Tazos Cook is another guy that is back from last season, was about a 37% three-point shooter. Campbell probably going to be lacking a little bit more on glass than they have in past seasons, but really like the overall, just shall we say, size along the perimeter. I think that that's going to be a tough matchup for a lot of teams, and as a result, I've got Campbell at number 5 in terms of my projector finish. At number 4, I feel like I have this team higher the most, but I'm going to be going with Hofstra. Hofstra led the country in two-point shooting defense last year. They bring back a 7-footer in Silas Sunday to be able to hold it down. Didn't do a ton last year, 4 boards, a block per contest, but James Patterson should be able to help out as well. 9.5 points, 6 boards per contest. You've got Cruz Davis, who's able to give you about 4.5 assists, a steal and a half, 14.5 points per game, shot 38.5% from three-point range. Joshua Reeves, he comes in from UIC after last year. He only gave the team 3.5 points per contest, but was able to shoot north of 41% from three-point range as well. AJ Willis, he was a 40% three-point shooter over at Wyoming in his time there. Only about 5 points per contest, but I do think that he's going to be able to find a nice role here. And for Hofstra, I do think that overall backcourt is once again going to be strong, with Cruz Davis, in my opinion, being one of the most versatile and one of the best guards in this conference. And I do think that they're going to do a nice job of mixing and matching and still be stuck on low. So with Hofstra, I did set them at number 4 in terms of my projector finish. At number 3, I'm going to be going with Charleston. Charleston is a unit that was really good at bombing it from 3 at home. 41.4% on the road, less than 32% when they're away from home. But having a guy like a Mr. Dean probably not even be one of your primary guys is just absolutely insane. Mr. Dean, first name Mr., last name Dean, 15.7 points, 5.5 boards, 2.2 steals per contest. You have in there Kobe Duggan, who gives you 15.5 points, 3.5 boards. And by Mr. Dean not being one of your main guys, I mean, he's just going to be one of many. Like Connor Hickman, he comes in after 2 years ago when he was over at Bradley, 14.5 points, 3 assists, shot 40% from three-point range. You bring in Bryce Baker, who's able to shoot 39% from 3 while he was over at Winthrop. This team is going to have size with bringing in Christian Reeves, a former top 200 recruit who was over on Duke and Clemson's benches the last few seasons. he should be able to really elevate this team down low. I love what I'm seeing out of Jackson Prunty as well. He had size and depth with about 6.5 points per contest. Limited sample size last season, but he should be able to help stretch the floor for the team as well. They've got depth. They've got a lot of talent. Jalen Counter, he comes in after he was a double-figure scorer out there in Conference USA last season as well. So really like the Charleston team. Have some question marks with regards to the defense, though, so I did have to put them at number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 2, I'm going with UNC Wilmington. Lots of transfers on this team, but there should be a little bit of a bond between these guys because once these guys transfer in from within the conference. CJ Luster, he was over at Stony Brook last year, 17 points of steal per contest, shot 42% from 3-point. Jonathan Lamothi, 14 points, 7.5 boards, 3 assists, steal and half per contest. He was able to do a nice job over at A&T, and when you had the suspensions go down last year at A&T, final 10 games of the season, nearly 20 points, 7.9 rebounds, 2.3 assists per contest. Gavin Walsh, about 10.9 rebounds, 11.3 points per game. Josh Greedy-Williams is back after he was able to give the team 5.5 points per contest. I know that Dylan was mentioning Christian May. It is going to be May Day, as at Towson 2 seasons ago, he was averaging about 11 points, 4 boards, able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and being able to bring back guys like a Nolan Hojan company, I think is very big, as he shot about 37% from 3-point range as well. Do like what UNC Wilmington is bringing to the table. Do like the fact that the transfers that they're bringing in, most of them are from within the conference. So at number 2, my projector or finish, I'm going to be going with UNC Wilmington. And at number 1 in my projector or finish, I am going to have to go with Towson. Towson, they were able to win the regular season last year at 16-2 in CAA play, and they bring back their top 2 scorers from last season. Dylan Williamson, 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, shot 43% from 3. Tyler Tejada, 4 boards, 16.5 points per contest. Morris Sek, 7'1" big man, that's able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game. Jack Dombia, he comes on over from Wright State, and he hopes to be Mr. Right for the team. 5.5 boards. This team is always one of the best in the country with regards to rebound percentage. Caleb Emabia, hopefully I said that correctly. He came off the bench as a 6'9", little bit of a combo player with about 4 boards per contest. And then Tyler Schmidt, he comes in for Valparaiso, 10 points per game, 38.5% 3-point shooter. That'll give the team the offensive spark that they need, along with a great defense, to be able to win this conference. I've got Towson, number 1 in terms of my projector or finish, and that will wrap things up for the CAA Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. A big thanks once again to Dylan Brett. He does great work over at Hofstra with their play-by-play work. Additionally, he does some great work over at Big Things for Madness. He joined me in segment number 2, and I'm going to be with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.